What would your younger self say about how your family turned out?
You ever been erased from your own damn family? Not disowned. That would at least come with a letter, a slammed door, maybe a screaming match in a driveway followed by a decade of awkward silence and forced reunions. No, what I'm talking about is much quieter, far more deliberate and, in a way, crueler. It's the kind of erasure that doesn't even grant you the satisfaction of being hated, just forgotten on purpose. You're still invited to the occasional group text, sure, usually after the main details have already been shared and settled. You're technically on the Christmas card list, somewhere beneath the third cousin's new baby and the dog's name. But when it comes to the photos and frames, the real trophies of family history, the curated pieces that sit in Grandma's living room, on the fireplace mantel, by her TV tray, well, you're just not there. As if you never were. It started exactly 10 years ago, though back then I didn't realize it. I was living out in Seattle, trying to survive on ramen and caffeine while bootstrapping my first software project from a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like mildew and ambition. That Christmas, I got a text from my younger sister, Claire, all smiles and filters, holding her newborn daughter in a perfectly decorated living room that looked like something out of a Pottery Barn catalog. Behind her stood our parents, all three beaming like some Hallmark ad, my mom in red, Dad in his usual beige sweater, Claire's husband Jake holding their dog. That photo got sent to Grandma June in a glossy black frame with gold trim, just like every year before. But that year, I wasn't in it. No one asked me to be. At first, I told myself it was just logistics. I lived across the country. I'd miss Thanksgiving because I had a beta launch coming up. I wasn't exactly camera ready, and besides, we hadn't taken a formal family photo in years. So I let it slide. I mean, I didn't want to be the drama. Claire had just had a baby, Mom was obsessed with her new Nana persona, and Grandma June was still recovering from hip surgery. It was understandable. 1 year, no big deal. The next year, it happened again. New outfits. Matching scarves. Coordinated smiles. Baby now a toddler. Still no mention of me. This time I noticed. I stared at the group photo on Grandma's side table when I visited in February. My name came up only once during that entire visit, and it was from Grandma herself, who asked if I was still playing with computers. I had just hired my 5th employee and signed a deal with a major client, but I smiled and said, yep, still playing. Nobody asked more. By year 3, it became tradition. I'd see the photo pop up in the family chat captioned, for Grandma. And there they were again, Mom, Dad, Claire, Jake, their kids, the damn dog, and a rotating holiday accessory to make it fresh. Sometimes plaid pajamas. 1 year it was white turtlenecks and fake snow. And always the same gold-trimmed frame. Clean. Polished. Carefully curated. And always, always, I was absent. Now, let me be clear. I didn't vanish. I wasn't off-grid. I didn't join a cult or ghost them all out of bitterness. I called. I sent gifts. I showed up to birthdays when I could, made small talk at weddings, even sat through Claire's awkward baby shower where she made a joke about tech people not understanding diapers. I played my part. But somewhere between me leaving for college on the East Coast and building a business from scratch, they quietly closed the circle and pretended I just didn't fit inside it anymore. I wasn't married. No kids. No Sunday church. I didn't make my bed with the same thread count of tradition they all seemed to worship. I worked late nights, dated the wrong people, said what I thought, and refused to pretend that Claire was the sun. And that, I guess, made me too much. What stung wasn't the omission, not really. It was the ease of it. How natural it seemed for them to keep on snapping photos, year after year, pretending like nothing was missing. No questions. No guilt. Just a quiet, mutual agreement that Avery would live her life over there, and the family, the real family, would live it over here, framed in gold and smiles and lies. This past December, the photo came again. New house this time, Claire's third. All-white kitchen in the background. Everyone in denim and white cotton, trying to look effortless. Mom even wore her pearls. The photo showed up in the chat at 10:43 a.m. with the message, "Just sent it to Grandma. She's going to love it." And maybe that's the moment something snapped in me. Not with fire, but with ice. I stared at that picture, this perfectly edited little lie, and I realized I didn't feel hurt anymore. I just felt done. Done pretending that I didn't notice. Done brushing it off with "it's fine" and they don't mean anything by it. Done believing that I had to wait around to be included. 10 years of being edited out. 10 years of polite exile. So I did what any practical, emotionally exhausted, and very successful woman would do. I opened my laptop, ordered a frame, same size, better quality, and went digging through my desk drawer until I found the local newspaper from 3 weeks ago. The front page had a photo of me, standing next to my co-founder, holding a bottle of champagne as we celebrated the IPO of our company. Seattle tech startup goes public at $500 million valuation, the headline said. I trimmed the article, fitted into the frame, wrapped it in bubble wrap, and addressed it to Grandma June's house with a handwritten note. Thought you might want a different kind of family photo this year. Love, Avery. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I just felt clear. Crystal clear. I mailed it 2 days before Christmas. Priority shipping. Tracking and everything. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. You don't wake up one day and suddenly realize you've been cut out of your own family's mythology. It happens slowly, subtly, like water dripping from a faucet you didn't know was broken until the floor's already warped. At first, you justify it. They're busy, I'm far away, it's just timing, and then the excuses start to get thinner and harder to swallow, like chewing on dry toast without water, until eventually you just stop pretending it doesn't hurt, but you also stop expecting it to change. That's where I was. Some people grow up in families where being different makes you interesting, even special, maybe the black sheep, sure, but still part of the flock. In mine, being different meant being tolerated from a distance, like a weird neighbor with too many bumper stickers. I was the first to leave our small Missouri town, the first to question anything my parents believed, the first to say, out loud, that I didn't plan on settling down by 25 with 2 kids and a mortgage. I wasn't rude about it. I didn't rebel with piercings or tattoos or dramatic speeches. I just quietly applied to out-of-state colleges, packed my bags, and left without a promise that I'd come back. Claire, my younger sister by 3 years, was everything I wasn't: soft-spoken, charming in a way that made grown-ups smile and tilt their heads, obedient without being boring, and just rebellious enough to seem relatable. She married her high school boyfriend at 22, had her first baby at 24, bought a house around the corner from our parents, and wore sundresses to Sunday brunch. She hosted baby showers where the napkins matched the cupcakes and the cupcakes matched her lip gloss. She posted pictures of her kids in coordinated outfits every Thanksgiving, and when she and Jake remodeled their kitchen, she took before and after photos that could have made it onto a magazine cover. I didn't envy her life, not exactly. I just noticed, year after year, how easy it was for everyone to love her, to celebrate her, to hold her up like she was the blueprint. My mom talked about Claire's new recipe for lemon bars like it was a Nobel Prize. My dad installed her patio lights and posted pictures with captions like, "My girls." Meanwhile, I could land $1 million client or sign a deal with Google, and the most I got was a thumbs-up emoji in the group chat, if they even noticed. The turning point, the one that made it undeniable, came the year of Claire's second wedding anniversary. She threw a backyard party with fairy lights, catered tacos, and a photographer friend from church snapping candids for Instagram. I was in town for a conference that weekend, just 40 minutes away, and I hadn't been invited. I found out through Facebook, like a stranger. My mom later claimed it was a small gathering and probably not your scene, like my presence would have ruined the aesthetic. That was the same year they sent Grandma the family photo with Claire holding their second baby, the one I didn't know was even born yet. I remember sitting in my apartment, staring at the group photo on my laptop, studying each face like a detective at a crime scene. Everyone was perfectly arranged, smiling just enough, like they'd practiced. There were matching outfits again, navy and blush this time, and someone had even made a custom wooden sign that said, "The Mitchells, blessed beyond measure." In the center stood Claire, glowing with a kind of joy I couldn't fake if I tried, holding the baby like a prop in a love story. And there it was, that ache, deep and raw, not because I wanted what they had, but because I'd stopped pretending they even saw me as part of the same story. I had become a footnote, if that. A whisper at most. Not hated, not missed, just edited out for consistency. I started noticing patterns, the group messages that never made it to me, the inside jokes I didn't understand, the phone calls that stopped coming around birthdays or holidays. Grandma June's Christmas cards still came, but they were always written in someone else's handwriting now. And when I called her, someone, usually Claire, would answer first, like a gatekeeper, and say things like, "Oh, she's resting now," or "She gets confused when there's too many calls." It started to feel like the woman who used to bake me peanut butter cookies and teach me how to crochet was slowly being taken from me, not by age or illness, but by curation. And the worst part? I let it happen. I let them cut me out one polite exclusion at a time. I smiled through it. I showed up when it was easy. I sent gifts. I asked about Claire's kids, even though I didn't know their birthdays. I told myself it wasn't personal, just circumstance. But it was personal. It was always personal. You see, being erased doesn't start with someone yelling, "Get out." It starts with silence. With not being included in plans. With your name not being mentioned when people say the whole family. With group photos where you're simply not there and no one notices the space you should occupy. And over time, you start to believe that maybe you never really belonged to begin with. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't send angry texts or call them crying. That's not how my family works. We deal in smiles and subtext and, "Oh, I didn't realize you felt that way." But the truth was, I had felt that way for years, and what made it worse was how good they were at pretending like nothing was wrong, as if ignoring me was the same as forgiving me for a crime I never committed. So when I finally mailed that gold frame to Grandma, the one with the newspaper clipping about my company's IPO, it wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about proof. Proof that I existed. That I built something. That I mattered. That while they were busy building their version of a perfect family, I was out here building something real, something that would outlive Christmas cards and curated Instagram posts. But even then, even as I sealed the envelope and paid extra for fragile shipping, a part of me wondered if anyone would even notice. Would Grandma open it herself, or would Claire intercept it? Would Mom roll her eyes and say, "That's just Avery being dramatic again"? Would Dad stay silent like always? Would the photo go straight into a drawer, hidden behind years of carefully framed denial? I didn't know, but I sent it anyway. Because maybe, just maybe, this time, the silence would break first. There's a peculiar kind of quiet that comes right after you press send on something you can't take back, not a loud, explosive kind of quiet, but a hollow, echoing silence, the kind that makes the air feel heavy and the floor beneath you just a little less solid. Like you're waiting for a sound that never comes, but know, deep down, that it will eventually, and when it does, it won't be soft. That was the silence I sat in for 3 days after mailing that gold frame to Grandma June, the one with the newspaper clipping about my company going public, the one with my face, my name, my hard-earned success, finally framed not in cheap holiday cheer or forced family poses, but in raw, unapologetic truth. The article itself had run in the Seattle Times, a half-page piece with a sharp headline and a photo of me and my co-founder standing on the steps of the courthouse, champagne in hand, smiling like we'd just kicked down a door, because we had. The IPO had been a long time coming, 6 years of grueling pitch meetings, broken contracts, 3 sleepless winters where we almost folded, and 1 brutal lawsuit we narrowly escaped, but in the end, we had pulled it off. My name was on the board, my name was on the press release, and that morning, it was my name in bold print on the front page. I bought 20 copies of the paper that morning, not out of vanity, but because I wanted proof, not just for myself, but for anyone who ever thought I had disappeared or faded into irrelevance simply because I didn't show up for Easter brunch or post photos of matching pajamas with toddlers. I framed one for my office. I framed one for the company lobby. I sent one to my old college professor who once told me, during a particularly painful semester, that some people build legacies without anyone clapping for them, and now I had sent one to Grandma June. By the fourth day, the silence broke. It started with a text, simple, casual, suspiciously friendly. Claire, hey stranger. Just saw a post about your company. That's amazing. How have you been? The tone was wrong. Claire never asked me how I'd been unless she needed something or had been told to. She never used exclamation points with me. The message sat on my screen like a catfish in a dating app, pretending to be warm, but swimming in lies. I didn't answer right away. I let it sit for a full day before replying with a single sentence. Glad you saw it. No emojis. No follow-up questions. Just an acknowledgement, cold and plain, like handing back a pen someone tried to steal. The next day, my mother called. That alone was notable, because my mother does not call me unless she absolutely has to, unless, of course, something has disrupted the perfect little orbit of her life. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice came through sharp and deliberate, polished as ever, the way she always sounded when she was trying to remain composed in the face of what she perceived as an attack on her carefully cultivated image. Well, she said, as if greeting a stranger at a funeral, you certainly know how to make an entrance. I said nothing, letting the silence press against her like a hand to the chest. She continued, a bit too brightly, your grandmother was surprised, to say the least. She said she had no idea your company was so significant. Most people didn't, I replied, voice level, since nobody ever asked. There was a pause then, just a beat too long to be casual, and I could almost hear her adjusting her earrings through the phone, collecting her thoughts like polished stones. Claire told me about the article, she said, which told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't seen it herself. Of course not. It had reached her not through her own curiosity or support, but through the chain of family surveillance, a network of passive-aggressive whispers dressed up as concern. I wanted to ask if she had seen the photo, if she had noticed the frame, if she had understood, really understood, what I was doing when I sent it. But instead, I waited. And sure enough, she did what she always does when confronted with something uncomfortable. She pivoted. Your grandmother was very touched, she said, with the same voice she once used to tell me to stop wearing so much eyeliner in high school. She put it right next to the other photo, the Christmas one, though I don't think she quite knew what to make of it at first. That line almost made me laugh, because of course she didn't. Grandma June, for all her warmth and wisdom, had been given a very specific script about who I was, one that had been written and revised by my mother and Claire over the years with surgical precision. I was the one who moved too far away, the one who missed church, the one who works with computers and probably doesn't want kids. To her, I was a blurry character, spoken of rarely and with vague concern, not someone who could be worth $500 million and land on the cover of a business magazine. But that's the thing about truth. When you finally drop it into a room full of curated lies, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It hums. It vibrates. It cracks the glass. After Mom hung up politely, of course, with a reminder that we should talk more often, I got another call. This one was from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Jake, Claire's husband, the man who once called me the liberal cousin at Thanksgiving like it was an insult dressed in a compliment. His voice was weirdly soft, like he was unsure how to address someone who had just stepped out of the background and taken center stage. Hey Avery, he said, just wanted to say congrats. That's, really incredible. Claire was blown away. We were all just saying how proud we are of you. We were all just saying. As if suddenly, after years of silence, I had been rediscovered. Like a missing heirloom found in an attic. Except I hadn't gone missing. I had simply stopped waving. And in that moment, sitting in my quiet apartment, listening to that voicemail, I realized something with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. They weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they were afraid the narrative was changing. Because for once, I had sent something they couldn't ignore. Not a sarcastic comment, not a half-hearted RSVP, not a politely declined invite, but a statement. A mirror. A frame they couldn't crop me out of. I didn't call any of them back. Instead, I texted Grandma directly, something I hadn't done in a long while, mostly because Claire had convinced everyone that Grandma was too old to text, too fragile, too easily confused. I wrote, "Hope you liked the frame. I thought it was time you saw the other side of the story." She responded with a single sentence. "I'm proud of you, honey. I always was, I just didn't know what I was allowed to say." And that, right there, was the crack. The fracture in the perfect photo frame they had built around her. Because for the first time, I knew she saw me, not the version they handed her, but the real one. And I wasn't done yet. There's a strange, almost addictive satisfaction in watching something so carefully constructed begin to fracture, not in a way that's explosive or dramatic. Like you might see in movies where secrets are shouted across dinner tables or wine glasses get thrown against walls, but in the slow, quiet way a mask starts to slip when its wearer forgets how tightly they've tied it on. That was exactly what began to unfold in the days that followed the delivery of the gold frame, a chain reaction of strained conversations, forced pleasantries, and an unmistakable sense of panic dressed up in performative affection. It started subtly, as all their reactions did, because people like my family don't deal in direct confrontation. They deal in half compliments, guilt wrapped in silk, and the kind of silence that screams louder than any argument ever could. After the messages from Claire and Jake and the curiously timed phone call from my mother, the first of its kind in over a year, I found myself on the receiving end of a flurry of communications that, if read out of context, might have seemed warm or even loving. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly found their way into my inbox with smiley-faced congratulations. People who had ghosted me after I skipped Claire's wedding now tagging me on Facebook in old high school photos, like we'd been best friends all along. There was even a message from my mother's church friend, a woman named Sandra who had once cornered me after service to ask if I was still not married, which I responded to with a smile so sharp it could have cut tile. She sent a screenshot of the article and added a message that made me laugh out loud in my kitchen. "Your mother must be so proud." What a surprise. That word, surprise, clung to everything they said, as if my success had sprung out of nowhere, like a lottery ticket instead of something I had bled for. They were surprised not because I had accomplished something, they were surprised because I had done it without their applause, without their permission, and, worst of all, without their presence. But the message that struck me deepest came not through text or voicemail, but by way of a shaky phone call I hadn't expected, Grandma June, calling me directly, without Claire as the intermediary. I recognized her number immediately, and for a moment I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to hear what she might say, afraid she would echo the same rehearsed politeness as everyone else, or worse, try to smooth it all over like she had always done in the past. But something in me needed to hear her voice, needed to know whether she had seen it, not just the photo, but the full shape of the gesture. Her voice, when she spoke, was softer than I remembered, fragile around the edges, but still unmistakably hers. "Avery, sweetheart," she said, and my chest tightened with a wave of childhood memories, peanut butter cookies, soft lap blankets, the way her hands always smelled like lavender and Windex. "I got your gift, that beautiful frame." I waited. Silence is a skill I've learned to wield better than any weapon. She exhaled slowly. "I want you to know something. I always noticed. Every year. I noticed when you weren't in the photo. I noticed when your name didn't come up during birthdays or when I asked how you were doing and they'd change the subject. I'm old, not blind. But they made it seem like you wanted it that way, like you had chosen your own path and weren't interested in being part of ours anymore." That line hit me like a punch to the throat because it was precisely the version of the story they had built, that I had left not because I needed air, but because I didn't care. That I had walked away from the table, and not that they had slowly, quietly stopped setting a place for me. She kept talking, her voice gaining strength like a kettle building steam. "But seeing that photo, seeing your face in that paper, I realized just how much of the truth I've been kept from. You've done something incredible, and they tried to make it seem like you were just off somewhere playing on your laptop." There was no bitterness in her tone, only quiet regret, the kind of sorrow that comes not from anger, but from realizing you were used, even gently, to uphold a lie. I thanked her. I told her I was okay. I told her she didn't need to apologize because I knew she hadn't shut the door, only stood behind it while others told her I'd left. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove down to see her. The visit was unannounced, impulsive, and entirely necessary. Her house hadn't changed much, save for the oxygen tank in the corner and the way she moved slower now, more deliberate. But when she saw me walk through her door, she smiled with the kind of joy that isn't performative, the kind that can't be faked. The frame was sitting right on the shelf beside the TV, next to a ceramic angel Claire had painted in junior high and a picture of my parents from their 40th anniversary party. She had cleared space for it, made it visible, not hidden in a hallway or stuck behind knickknacks. She had placed it where she could see it every day. We sat in her living room for hours, sipping lukewarm tea and talking about everything but the article, because she didn't need to hear more. She just needed to see me, and for me to see that she had seen me. Before I left, she said one more thing, something simple, but heavier than it seemed. They were wrong, you know. You didn't leave the family. They just stopped turning around to check if you were still there. I hugged her tighter than I had in years, and for the first time, I let some of the anger go, not all of it, because there's power in holding on to enough to stay sharp, but enough to breathe again. And just when I thought the dust had started to settle, Claire sent a text that nearly knocked the wind out of me. It read, "I've been thinking, maybe this year you should be in the Christmas photo. We can talk details." No apology. No admission. Just a sudden invitation, like an olive branch dipped in artificial sweetener. As if being seen in a frame now that I was publicly successful could somehow patch over 10 years of erasure. As if inclusion, on their terms, was something I should be grateful for. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because maybe, just maybe, I had something better in mind. And it didn't involve standing in front of a fireplace pretending nothing ever happened. There comes a moment, after you've spent years pressing your face up against the glass of your own bloodline, watching everyone inside pretend the view is complete without you, when something finally shifts, not because they realize what they've done. Not because regret creeps in on quiet feet, but because the story changes, and for the first time, the person they left out is the one holding the pen. That moment, the one I'd imagined in the loneliest corners of my adult life, didn't come with apologies or tearful reunions or any acknowledgement of the small violences they'd inflicted in the name of normalcy. It came, instead, with an avalanche of carefully worded messages, calculated tones, and voices suddenly rich with warmth that had been missing for over a decade. The morning after Claire's text, that ridiculous, tone-deaf invitation to finally be in the family Christmas photo, as if all the years of exclusion were just a scheduling error, my phone buzzed with the kind of frequency it hadn't experienced in years. Not since my college graduation, probably, back when I was still young enough to be impressive but not yet threatening, when my accomplishments were cute rather than challenging, when I was still someone they could place neatly in a box labeled potential, and ignore the way that box kept growing teeth. The first message came from Aunt Ruth, who had once accused me, to my face, at a funeral, no less of being selfish for not moving back home to help take care of my mother after her knee surgery. As if the daughter who lived 30 minutes away and posted Bible verses on Instagram wasn't more qualified. Aunt Ruth's message was brief, but the undertone was impossible to miss. "So proud of you, sweetheart. What a journey. We're all just so thrilled for you. We always knew you had it in you." The sheer audacity of that "we" nearly made me laugh, as if there had ever been a collective breath held in my name, a single moment of communal belief in what I could become. Then came a voicemail from my father, which was more surprising than anything else, given that he's a man who communicates primarily in nods and occasional grunts, and who has spent the last 2 decades pretending our relationship is perfectly fine as long as no one brings up politics or my refusal to attend church. His voice, when I pressed play, was unfamiliar, unsure, like a man realizing he might have backed the wrong horse and now wants a seat at the victory parade. "Hey, Avery. I just wanted to say we saw the news. That's really something. We should probably talk sometime. I think your mom would like that too." There was a hesitation there, a small fracture in his voice, as if he knew the words he should say. "I'm sorry, we were wrong, we should have done better, but couldn't bring himself to spit them out. And honestly, I didn't expect him to. My father's generation doesn't apologize. They just show up to barbecues and hope the meat is enough. But it wasn't the texts or the voicemails that did it, not really. It was what came next. A photo. From Grandma. Not a posed family photo, not another glossy portrait arranged by Claire like a Pinterest board, but a photo taken by shaky hands, a close-up of the frame I had sent her, sitting squarely in the center of her mantel, flanked by decades of curated family history. And in that photo, nestled beside it, was something I hadn't expected, one of the old photos of me from childhood, the one where I'm maybe 12, sitting at her kitchen table, wearing overalls and laughing at something off camera. I hadn't seen that photo in 20 years. Her message was short, but it cut through every layer of noise that had built up over the past week. Now they sit side by side. Just like they should have been all along. That was the moment I knew this had never been about punishment. It had never been about vengeance or proving a point or rubbing my success in their carefully powdered faces. It was about balance. It was about correcting a story that had gone off course years ago, a narrative hijacked by convenience and cowardice, one where my absence was easier to explain than my presence. But now, they all wanted to rewrite the ending. Claire sent another message a few days later. Longer this time. I've been doing a lot of thinking, it began, which, coming from her, was code for rehearsed empathy, and I realize now that we may have made you feel excluded. That was never the intention. Things just got complicated. You were busy, we were busy, and maybe we all let too much time pass. But I'd really like to fix that. I want the kids to know you. It was clever, in a way, bringing the kids into it. Claire always knew how to weaponize sentimentality, to frame her arguments with just enough softness to make resistance feel cruel. But the thing is, I didn't want a seat at their table anymore. I didn't need to be crammed into a group photo like a correction, smiling between people who only looked in my direction when it suited their narrative. So I did what I had learned to do better than any of them. I created my own space. I went online and bought another frame, this one larger than the last, antique brass with subtle detailing, the kind of frame that belongs in a study filled with heavy books and secrets. Inside it, I placed a printout of the article, not the original this time, but a cleaned-up version with a quote beneath the headline, "Some stories don't need approval to be true." Then, in the corner, I taped a small note, handwritten in my cleanest script, to Grandma, the only one who didn't pretend I was invisible. I mailed it without ceremony, without a tracking number, without telling anyone. A week later, I got a photo from her again. The new frame, standing alone this time, on a small table beneath the window where the light hits in the early afternoon. No competing photos. No distractions. Just the truth. Claire's last message came the next morning. No preamble. No emojis. Just this, Mom's upset. She says you're trying to humiliate the family. That was it. That was the line. The quiet admission. Because what they really feared wasn't that I had succeeded. It was that I had done it without asking for permission. Without following their script. Without needing their version of love, which came with conditions and terms and carefully guarded praise. I never responded to Claire. Instead, I called Grandma. We talked for an hour, maybe two, about everything but the frame. She told me about her garden, about the neighbor's dog who keeps digging up her begonias, about a new recipe she'd tried for blueberry pie that didn't quite set. And I listened, not just to the words, but to the space between them, the peace that had taken root now that the masks were off and the truth had been placed where everyone could see it. Before we hung up, she said something that I'll carry with me longer than any apology they could offer. You didn't need a frame to belong. But I'm glad you finally gave yourself one. And as for the family? Let them call. Let them scramble. Let them gather next December and take another perfectly arranged photo, with their matching scarves and their curated smiles, pretending the absence in the frame isn't glaringly obvious. Because this time, the space they left behind, the space where I used to wish I could fit, now belongs to them. And I've already moved on.